Good morning. Hi everyone. Happy Tuesday. My name is Anna Marie and I'm with the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority. Whoops. Thank you so much for tuning in again to another art lesson with artist and naturalist Edward Rooks. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. If this is your second or your third or your fourth or your fifth time tuning in, welcome back. Today Edward is going to be drawing a really cool amphibian that we have lots of different species here in the Santa Clara Valley. The frog. You can see we're actually in the North Coyote Valley Conservation Area right now, but I hope you can see there's actually a little bit of water behind me. Even though it's June, there's still a bit of water in this area. If you come back here in the winter, it's usually going to be a lot wetter and more full of water. So it's a really, really cool piece of land that we're standing on. And a special thing today, so I've been listening to all of your comments about hoping that you could see Edward's reference photo at the same time. So if you go to the description in this live stream, you can see a link that will have the photo that Edward's going to be basing his painting off of today. So you can always open that in another tab and go back to it. We'll also be having it here, and I'll pan to that as often as I can. But if you want to see both at the same time, that's going to be hopefully a really good way to do it. There's a little bit of breeze today, but we do have our mic, so let us know if the sound's not picking up and we can move it closer to where Edward's speaking. With that, I'm going to take it away. Edward, thank you.
Thanks, Anna Marie. Good morning, everybody. So the frog we're going to do today is a tree frog. A very common tree frog in this area. It's called the Sierran Treefrog. It used to belong to the Pacific tree frog group. Well, it still belongs to that group, but it used to be one species, considered one species, and used to be considered a hyla, true tree frog. But now they're more considered like a chorus frog, Pseudacris. So Pseudacris sierra, there it is. Very pretty little frog. It appears to be green, but don't let it fool you, it can change color. This frog can be brown, it can be black, it can be golden, and not really gold, but it has a pretty tint to it, and it just changes color within minutes. So it's camouflage. Actually, let me think. Well, we'll just get started. I was going to talk about biology and all that, but maybe we'll do that as the time goes on if we have time. Usually I'm pressed for time, so I'll just get right to it. So, as usual, I want to try to fill as much of my page as possible. And I want to get the head in. Actually, I'll do this because it's helpful. I want you to notice some features of frogs, okay? So, they've got a bit of a hump here. What's that about? Right in the middle of the back. Okay, the head is unusually large for an animal. And, you know, it's got toes that are fingered like ours, but they got little pads, suction pads on them. Well, they call them suction pads, but it's actually mucous membranes that they use to stick on. So here's a look at the structure of their skeleton. It's quite different from ours, isn't it? These are some of the earliest vertebrates to come out of the water. Okay, so even before reptiles, the reptiles came from these. And they've got long feet. There's the ankle. Okay, here is the pelvis, and the sacral joint right there where the spine comes off of is in the middle of the back, and that's that hump. Okay, so the pelvis is unusual, and then of course a big head relative to the body. Here's the chest, and there's the rump. So we'll look back at the photograph. Now you'll know what those humps are. That's the top of the pelvis. So there's the pelvis there falling back down to the butt down there, and there's the spine, and there's the skull. Okay? So, I'm going to draw with colored pencils, and then this is what I did with the butterfly last time, and it worked well, so hopefully you'll be able to see my lines. If not, let Anna Marie know, and I will immediately darken them as I have to. I'll try to make them dark as possible. So I'm going to draw it with either a blue or a green to match the skin color so it doesn't mess up my painting in the end. I'm going to use watercolors. Again, I'm using a watercolor block, Arches. It's a small block, and it's got 25 sheets when I started. Blocks are glued around the edge to keep them flat so they don't buckle. And I've got my paints on a palette, whoops, that I have sprayed, so now they're kind of moist and ready for me to use. Okay, so with that, let's get started. Green pencils, and I want to have the frog across the middle here, something like that, and I'm going to have the frog start about here and end about here. I want to have good space around it, so the head's going to take up about this much of the drawing, and then the body is going to take up about that much of the drawing. So I now have to check how many heads in a body, and it's just over 1. So that's about right. So I'm going to darken that up so you can see it. I will have the bump on the sacral bump, I can't remember what it's called, on the back here. So there's the back going down to the butt, and here's the belly, and there's the head coming in here like this. So that's going to be the basic shape of my frog. Can you see that all right?
I can see it through the camera. People watching, let us know if Edward needs to darken up the lines a little bit. Sometimes it can be a little more faint over the...
Right, and so I'm going to have,
internet.
right behind the head here, I'm going to have the shoulders. So I want to make sure I have somewhere for the shoulders. They're going to be there and there. And then the legs are going to come down to where the legs meet the ground. I don't know if you can see this over here. You can?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay, so here it is. It's about a head's distance down below. So I want to go down here and make sure my hand or foreleg hits right about there. So I'm going to use this to clip that on underneath the eye. And I don't know where the eye is going yet, but it's about here. So it's going to be somewhere around there. That's where my foot's going to go. And then my hind leg, there's going to be a space. So the arm comes from the shoulder. Here's the shoulder here. Down below the body to elbow. And then the elbow comes out to where the hand is, and then we're going to have 3 toes curving in towards the head like this. And probably about half a head long, the toes. Oh, a little more maybe, huh? Quite big. So maybe my toes are too small. Well, I'll put the pads on the end there like that. This toe in the middle is the longest. Okay. And I'll show you a little illustration of that soon enough. So there's going to be my leg there like that. Okay? I can place my eyes. So I'm going to just go from a bulge over here. An eye is going to be somewhere. I'll just roughly put it in. And then another eye is going to be directly across between the hand and that, which is halfway down the head, somewhere like that. That's about right. I'll reshape it for the perspective, and it's going to be flattened a bit on the top, something like that. Okay, the mouth will come in behind the eye, above the shoulder, something like that. Quite a large mouth, right? And then the eye socket is going to be there and there. I'm going to make sure this eye socket is big enough. It's a little small right now. Something like that.
I love watching it come together. This is great.
But you're just constantly checking against everything else. You know, it's all about relative proportions, relative placement. Okay, so the next thing I need to know is where this foot is going to go, and it's level with this one and closer to the body, but keep in mind this triangle of white, this space. Okay. So we want to make sure we have good space here. There's that big space there. It's about the size of the foreleg. So at least that big, maybe a little closer, something like that. Maybe a little between those 2 lines somewhere. And then the back of the leg, the ankle is up against the butt right there like that. Coming in along this line. The thigh goes into the body a bit here like that. Okay? And then this is the calf, like that. The foot's going to be right underneath here. The longest toe is going to be the same middle toe there, coming out further towards the hand, sort of like that, and it's got that little bulb at the end. This one's coming out. We can only see 2 of its 5 toes. They're all tending inwards. Frog's toes always tend in the front hands are held like this, and the back feet also held inwards. Okay, and then the foot comes down, touches the ground about there. That's the foot. There's the ankle. Okay, is that big enough? Doesn't quite seem big enough. No, I don't think it's big enough. So I'm gonna have to redo that a bit, and maybe what I'll do is I'll switch up colors to redo that, so you'll see my changes. I'll go with a brown, an orange brown that's more matching that. So what I'll do is angle the knee down a bit more, trying to keep that white shape there. It's gonna come here, the ankle is going up here. Well, I can't really make it too much longer, but I'll just change up the shape a tad, trying to make that foot a bit bigger. And I can erase. I have my black pearl eraser, which can take care of pretty much most marks. And if it doesn't go completely, I can always paint over it. Okay, so there's the foot. That looks a little better to me. Okay, and then I'll just use a purple for the belly and bring that line up a little fatter. Okay, now the other leg in the back, I'll just use green again, but a lighter green, and that's going to be, the foot's going to be over the sacral bump. So somewhere here like this is going to be where the foot's going to be. Ankle is going to be back here. Look at this white shape. Okay, it's quite small. It's something like that. And then the toe comes out towards the shoulder. So the toe comes all the way out to here like this. Okay. And then the last toe jutting out like that. So there's our frog. And I'm just looking at it, scanning it to make sure it looks okay. It looks a little fat right there, so I'll tone that down. I'll bring the line in, cut the line in. And then I want to make that sacral hump a little more obvious, so maybe bring that down. That doesn't look quite right yet, but I'll fidget with it while I'm painting too. So I always have opportunities to alter and correct. I'll bring that butt back a bit. It's relatively okay. So I'm ready to go, ready to paint. I'm going to make this purple. That's the wrong purple to use, I think. More of a watercolor pencil here, and then we're going to bring this stripe through the eye, which is consistent with all three species. So I said it was originally called the Pacific tree frog, and now it's called the Sierra chorus frog or the Sierra tree frog, and it was split into three. So the Pacific tree frog or chorus frog now goes from Northern California all the way up into Washington State, north of us, okay? And then this Sierra tree frog goes all the way across California, Central California, across the mountains and into and up north into Idaho and up, you know, so it's quite a large range. And then there's a Baja, Southern California version called the Baja tree frog. So it's same, it looks they all look the same. You got this eye stripe. It starts on the shoulder down here and ends on the nose up here. So it comes up into the eye like that. Can you see that on the camera? Maybe not.
I can see it.
You can see it? I'll do a darker blue. Okay, so maybe it'll look more obvious. It goes up and down, and there's a nostril there. Okay, down towards the mouth, and then back from the eye, down. It gets a little wider in places, and the reason it's getting wider here is because that's where the ear of the frog is. They don't have a pinna, they don't have an outer ear, but they have the eardrum on the surface, and that eardrum is right behind the eye like that. It's hidden in there, you can't really see it, but I know it's there, so I'm going to put it in there, and you can just see the shadow ring of the edges of it. Okay, and then this comes down, getting narrower towards the shoulder, something like that. Rough, it's never going to be exact, okay? There's going to be some spotting. So this belly is going to be sort of purplish in the shadows down there, whitish, okay, skin. And then you're going to have some spotting. There'll be a big spot there, one there near the leg, one over here. Now the next thing I want to do is get ready for white reflections of light, that white sunlight glinting off of the frog. So I need to find, I will hope I put it in my kit. There it is.
And then for anyone that's just tuning in and missed the very beginning, you can see we have Edward's reference photo there in the corner, but when I zoom in on the pad of his drawing, just know that in the description of the video there's a link where you can see that same photo. So if you want to like open that in a different tab, or just open that and go back to it when I'm not completely focused on it on the video.
So with watercolors or any paint, when you're painting, you can use a mask to keep areas from having paint put on them. You can paint over the masking, but it won't leave paint on the paper. You can then lift the mask after you finish painting, and there'll be white paper where you leave it. Pretty much what it is glue. You paint it on, okay? You paint it on, and it just leaves a spot of white. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put, there's white on top of the back, right, especially at that sacral hump. And so I'm going to put some white spots there, just random but close, along the top of the spine, so towards the top hair area, on the back of the frog. And most of them are just going to be sort of spread out pretty close to each other, and pretty randomly spread out. So I'm just putting down some blobs. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, probably not.
Not really.
No.
They're there.
They're there, and actually it's colored yellow. You can see it on the bottom here. That's a dye that's in the glue, and it's like rubber cement, okay? So that I can just peel it off after I'm done with it. And so I can see it, but barely, so I know where they are. And it takes a little while to dry before I can start painting, but it will have a lovely effect by using this. Right along the top of the leg here, there's quite a bit of glare, so I'm just going to add some. Now this will ruin a paintbrush. Putting glue in a paintbrush is not a good thing. And so what you do is use an old paintbrush and completely fill it with soap. And so it just runs off the soap afterwards, okay? And now I want to go on the top of the leg here. Hopefully this will show up nicely in the end. Really along the top of the calf, all the way to the end. And some of them are large, some of them are small. So vary it up, make it pretty random. You don't have to be too careful about it, but don't make it too big. Okay, and then try to make sure that some are close together and some are wide apart, so that it has that random effect, natural and organic looking. Just a few on the side here and a few on the eye, and then I'll let it dry. So especially on the top of the eye, a few there, and then along the rim, right along top. I'm just put a line of them, and then one spot in the eye, that's the glint of the eye, right above the pupil there. Done. Oh, foreleg. So I'll put some on the feet too. So a couple down there. I have to figure out which toes I'm using, and especially on this upper arm, and a few on the forearm, and then some on the hand down here, and some on the toe pads. Okay. Not too pretty. Alright, so I'm going to wash that off. Close that up, let that dry.
And all of you viewers, the wind is picking up, so let us know how the sound is, because if it's cutting in and out, Edward can clip the mic right onto his lapel.
Oh yeah, I should do that, huh? I forgot some on top of the head here. Alright, all the way to the nose. Alright, none on the lip, none on the shoulders. That's good. Okay, so now we'll lay the painting flat. The wind will work in our benefit in that it will allow us to lay the to have this rubber cement dry quickly. We got some sun dapple. That's not good. But you can see, maybe you can see the glue glistening in the sun there as I move it.
We're just gonna work with the dappled light.
Yeah, we'll work with it. And then when I bring it back up, it'll be fine. There's a plant hopper on my frog. He'll eat that. They love to eat insects. They eat anything that they can. Worms, insects, snails, spiders. Alright, so I'm putting the glue away. And I'm bringing the paints out. And I'm bringing my big brush out. We'll start with the light colors. I always start with the light colors first. So I'll turn the reference towards the camera. I don't know if you can see that. Not right now. Okay.
There we go. Now
I can see it. Alright, now I'm going to try to use fresh water so I don't get any rubber cement in my paint, especially with the light stuff. Alright, so light greens, light purples. So underneath the frog down here, whoops, we're going to have a purple shadow. Okay, and I'm just going to put some bright green, verdant green with some yellow in it, lemon yellow towards the head, just to get it pretty and shiny and frog-like. Avoiding the mouth. Well, I can go over the mouth because that will be painted brown, and that brown will cover up any green that I put. It won't matter. Alright, so there's the sort of yellow green of the head. That'll be the brightest color. And it goes down to the belly down there like that, over the back. Like that. You can start to see the resist showing up as white spots there. That's where we're going to have white spots in the end. And there's the hind leg. Oh, too far. I can just blame it on bad drawing. Alright, there we go. And then this leg here. That leg there. Something like that. And then this leg here, something like that.
So now you can really see where Edward put down that the mask, which is all of those white spots that are showing up now.
Yay! Looking good. I'm happy. It's really froggy.
And Alan is wondering, after this, will Edward draw a bullfrog or red-legged frog or both?
Oh, maybe in the future. I would love to.
Tree frog's only one for today.
We have only just 1 hour today. So I'm going to add some crimson to some cerulean blue and make a nice rich purple shadow color to put a shadow underneath the frog. And so I'm going to go down here. There's the tummy. I'm probably doing this a little early. Should have let that green dry, but I wanted it to be wet. Something like that. And then some under the hind leg. Like that. Maybe some under that leg there. Okay. Let that dry. Wind, do your magic. Looks froggy.
Oh, definitely. Those reflection little spots just add so much.
It does. It's magic, you know. The thing is that you don't want to have complete control because it takes some of the fun out of painting, you know. Half the fun. I'm a stickler for detail, so I tend to overpaint. And it's been fun learning with my friends at the Santa Clara Watercolor Society how to loosen up a little. Okay. I'm just softening the edge by taking away some of the paint, adding just pure water, and that'll sort of soften that edge of the shadow a little bit, hopefully. A damp brush, not a wet brush. There we go. Just cutting in, taking up some of that paint, just softening that edge. Okay, and then later on I can add a darker tone underneath the belly that suggests more of a heavier shadow, the umbra, the middle of the shadow, which is darkest. I'm lifting some of that paint. It's not drying as quickly as I would like. That's not...
So, just a comment to Alan's comment about bullfrogs or red-legged frogs. So bullfrogs are actually a non-native species, which isn't to say there aren't a ton of them here, but they were brought over, and they are kind of a problem. They eat our native species, they take up habitat, and then the red-legged frog that Alan also mentioned is a native species, and on top of that, it's a threatened, it's a special status species. Oh, perfect.
This is one of my pictures, so I was lucky.
Yeah, they're really rare. So if you see one, give it a ton of space, but also consider yourself very lucky.
Beautiful frog. And it was one of my considerations for today. You know, it's always hard to pick out what to paint. Well, while this thing is drying, so these amphibians are some of the first animals to come out of the water and to begin the evolution of vertebrates on land. Okay, so when I said animals, my wife is going to be upset. She's going to say vertebrates. There were insects on land already. Yes, she's quite right. And of course, they came out from fish-like animals walking on their fins. Okay, that turned into feet and evolved into things like salamanders. Doesn't it look like a salamander?
That's it.
Okay.
2 steps later.
Yeah, really. 2 steps later. And then, of course, why did he come out of the water?
That's a good one.
Anyway, so, and then, of course, you had frogs evolve away from having tails, and toads are like frogs, and now we've got quite a bit of diversity, but they're really ancient animals, like 300 million years or something like that, so really ancient. Okay.
Yeah, if you have a favorite amphibian, leave it in the comments so we can take a little poll.
Yeah.
I love salamanders. I think they're...
I would love to paint a salamander, a newt or a salamander.
Yeah. Oh, they're so beautiful.
Yeah, there's so much to paint out there. So now we're at the point where the paint is not dry, but it's damp. And it's damp, that means I can add to it, and with not a wet brush. You don't want to put a wet brush, a damp brush, otherwise a wet brush would run and spoil everything you've done. So you just want a damp brush, and you can add some shadows to that, hopefully, and it'll move into the purple that I've laid down there and darken up underneath the belly there maybe. So I'll just add a little bit there and let it run on its own. Because it's damp, it'll have soft edges, which is what you want in shadows, right? And so maybe underneath here, just darken up right where the animal is touching the ground, and it looks like a ground shadow. Okay, we can have another toe over here, and then under this front leg here we can maybe have some shadows as well. Okay, now I'll add, because this is dark, where my pupil is going to go, just starting to layer some of the first layers of the darks while I'm waiting for the paint to dry. And there is the beginning of that stripe. I don't want it to run into the green, so I'm taking a risk here. But there it is. And then underneath here, the shoulder, it's a bit shadowy. Okay, it's coming. So mainly what I want to do right now is change up the greens a little bit. So add darker greens to the greens. And so what I'll do is get some hooker's green instead of that verdant green, mix it with the verdant green. And hooker's green is more of a brownish looking green that people use a lot for trees. It's a darker green, and so it will allow me to make it more of a natural shadow green in the frog here. And again, like I said earlier, I'm going to take away some of that paint so it's not too wet. I'll grab a piece of tissue and just take the excess water out of it, and then go to the sacral hump from the rump here. You can see it's pretty dry already. It's not really doing much, but so now I'm creating the illusion of light hitting the back of the frog right at that sacral hump, going down the side towards the eye and over the belly completely, over the face. This is the shadow side of the frog, and so this is the shadow side of the leg. I want to have shadows here, shadow side of the leg there. All of this is going to be in shadow. That's going to be in shadow. That doesn't have any green on it, so I can just leave that as is. And already you're starting to see a little bit of an effect of light and shadow, 3 dimensions. And now I'm going to use the same color and just use the tip of the edge of my flat brush to create dots. And try to make it random, don't make it all the same shape. But you want to just put some dots as if the little flecks. Frog skin is smooth or it's rough. And when they're rough, they're called toads, right? Not always. Frog skin is really neat. Frog skin, of course, can change color. So they have chromatophores. These are cells that will change color according to emotions and background and whatever it is that's triggering change. And then you have permeability. Frogs can breathe through their skin. They can transmit water through their skin. So it's important for them to stay wet. If they dry out too much, they'll die, they'll desiccate. Okay, so they need to stay wet, and they can breathe through wet skin, so that's fine. So there you go. So I'm getting the idea that this is rough skin by adding some shadows to the highlights. And you can see I'm putting highlights and shadows together on the light side of the frog here. You can see where I have the masking fluid is where I'm putting these dots right now. Okay, and then a shadow on this side of the eye and a shadow on that will make it look more rounded. All right, looking good. And I can keep adding to that, so I can add even darker green, another green, a bluer green, to that same hooker's green, verdant green mix. That's too much. But with that, I'm going to get, and then I'll wipe it off again, so it's not too wet. I'm going to get these darker green shadows, very pretty blue-green shadows, and I can add some more texture into the shadow here with that, or I can carry a shadow right across. So shadows within shadows now. So these are the second stage shadows, and that's going to add more dimension and texture to this frog. And then shadows on the face here, dark spots. There's actually a dark spot right there on the frog's head, between the eyes, shadow on the eyes there. Okay. And then shadows here, and because it's a round surface, you actually have a bit of a shadow along the edge as well. And that just gives it more depth. You're varying the greens, it's prettier. Artists love to do that, it's just more fun, but it also adds a lot of texture and depth. Darkest at the end, light at the top, where the light's hitting it. There we go. Behind the eye, and I think that's good enough for the greens. I can start on the browns. How's that?
Good to me.
Isn't that fun? All right, so now I'm going to use a sort of a reddish, yellowish brown, a warm brown on the leg hair, on the leg, all the legs, and on the head, eye. You see the eye? It's sort of a ochre yellow base with a reddish shadow. So I'm going to start with the yellow ochre, which is a yellow brown, one of the oldest paints known. These are the colors and these are the pigments used by cavemen. Wow. We're still doing it today. I am the descendant of. Okay, so here goes. Yellow browns. That wasn't so long ago, was it? You think about it.
In the relative scheme of things, no, not at all.
We are all cavemen. Still the same as the Stone Age man. Okay, so there it is. That's better. That's more yellow. So I'm just going to bring that yellow into the stripe here, down the mouth, up the jaw, like that. That's pretty. There's a little bit on the eye there. You can use it to actually vary the green a bit too. Add a little bit of that to the green. And then down in the tympanum, which is the ear. Down on the belly a little bit, just on the edge right there. Especially, and all over that leg. I want that leg to be yellow ochre. That's the start of the leg color.
And this is a good time to remind everyone, because I can't really show both the reference photo and the painting at the same time, but a link to the reference photo is right in the description, so if you want to pull that up and have it alongside you, it's a good time to do it.
Thanks for doing that.
You know, it's a bummer that it took me like 5th or 6th one, but thanks for everyone that suggested it. It was kind of a creative spin on it.
Yeah. So that looks pretty cool, huh? That's adding some colors. It's fun having Anna Marie here for feedback because I can't hear you guys out there in the internet.
I'm going to be honest, it's been a pretty silent comment section.
Oh, okay.
This time, which I think is a good thing.
They're busy working, I hope.
Exactly.
All right, so I got a bit of a tongue going there for some reason. And I'm just going to wet that and dab at it. I don't want the frog's tongue, the forked tongue of the frog. All right, so should we put it back up now? Or?
Yeah.
All right, we're going to bring it back up. It's the wet stuff's dry enough. Got a nuthatch right in arrows. All right, so the next step is to bring some of the red browns to the jaw and the eye, and that'll be the shadow of the browns. Okay, and how are we doing for time?
We're about
20 minutes to go.
22.
All right, and so what I want to do is I want to introduce a new brush. I normally do my detailing with my pointed round, and I've done that in the past, but I thought I should have introduced you to the liner brush before. It's a very important detailing brush. It can allow you to do finer lines. So if you want to do like the gape of the mouth, see that? Very fine line. It's a very pointed brush. Okay, so that's the brush you would want for final details. I can then add on top of that, but I like to do the big stuff first. So I'm going to go back to my round, and so this is my pointed round, much bigger brush, and there are different sizes, and then they get smaller and smaller, but they're very, very handy at this point where I'm starting to put in details. I don't need the biggest one, so maybe I'll go to the 8, which is the sort of, oh, it's a 10. Okay, it's a fairly big brush, but it's not the biggest. Okay,
And Allie Rice is joining us from Cotswold, England.
Oh my,
It's
wow.
great to see the creative process in action. She's an artist too.
Oh,
Great,
fantastic.
thank you.
Yeah. All right, so let's go put some red browns. And so again, these are ochres. This is a sienna actually. This is a burnt sienna. There's raw sienna, which is more like an oak brown color, gray brown. Burnt sienna, which is more of a red brown. See that pretty red brown? And with the 10, you can really put down a wide line or a fine line because it's pointed. So you can vary the weight of the line. Varied lines are prettier than just consistent lines that are all one width. All right, so here is where we have the brown of the eye stripe, and then we're going to put the brown on the jaw down here a little wider than I have it. So all of that's going to be pretty dark. All of this is going to be pretty dark. And here's the line. I'm going to outline the leg now, and it goes from thicker, the muscles are really thickest up at the shoulder here. So I'll put in those muscles. So I'm sort of drawing with this pointed round. And I'll draw in the belly there. I think that's a good spot. It's a little thin. Can always thicken it up if I still think that later. That's the top of the leg. There's the top of the calf. So that's the upper thigh. And here's the butt. And so now I can sort of draw with this reddish brown because it's the light shadow. I break the world up into darks and lights, and in the dark side of the globe you're going to have light darks and dark darks, and then you're going to have black. On the light side of the world you're going to have white, light darks, dark lights. So light lights, dark lights, okay? So right now I'm doing the light darks. Simple? So that I can then do the dark darks on top of that. Alright, so I'm using this red, but it's also my light dark. And I can draw with it, and I can make mistakes and then correct that with the dark dark. So here goes, there's the underside of the foot. There's that, and there's my first toe pad. Sticky toe pads. Okay, and then here is the bottom of the calf coming up like that. Yay! All right, now underneath the forearm, here's the elbow. Top of the forearm. Just sort of outlining with this, keeping it light. So I can always make a dark shadow side. There's the toe pad, knuckles, palm, knuckles, toe pad. Now they have 4 toes in the front, no little toe. So like that, that's a frog's foot. And the longest toe is the index toe. Okay, so that should be the longest toe, and then there'd be another one back here. So if I actually drew one in there, and even though it's not in the photograph, I would be correct. I could do something like that. That would be totally correct. And you can. So the same thing here. You can put another toe here, because you know there is one. It's just in this photograph hidden in the back. And I'm just going to run that over like that. Soften that up. All right. So next. Oh, I don't want that. That's cutting into my sacral bump. Don't want that. Okay. Toe pad, knuckle, toe pad, knuckle, toe pad, knuckle, toe pad, and just leave that as is. I'm touching things, making little boo-boos. And the thing with brown, especially siennas and some of these earth colors, they stain. So you don't want that. And that's too harsh. I'm going to soften that up too. I have a damp brush here, clean water, and that edge was too harsh for a shadow. So I'm just going to lift some of that paint by scrubbing it off with a damp brush. And hopefully I don't ruin the thing. That's one of the harder things to do without ruining your painting. But anyhow, I just wanted to soften that shadow edge. There we go. Okay, hopefully that'll work. Now next, we're going to switch to an even darker brown, an umber. And umber is the next step up from sienna, and this is a red umber, so burnt umber. There's raw umber, which is a sort of a grayer, darker umber. And I'm just going to add a brown spot there, brown spot there, brown spot there. And they're pretty rough, so don't worry about the edges. Okay, these are spots on the skin for camouflage. And they're very organic, different on every frog. Some of these little bumps on the skin, the texture on the skin, have these brown spots. So you can just add some of those around pretty randomly. I'm looking at the photograph here and I can see where they are, and I'm just trying to match some of them on the back here pretty randomly, but you don't have to. You can rely on every frog having spots in different places. So your frog is just as valid as any other frog. Okay, and then they have a pretty dark area of a cluster of spots on top of the head here. Okay, and now here is the shadow of the eye. Underneath the lid of the eye, you want a pretty dark shadow there. Underneath the bottom of the eye there. And then leave some of these areas lighter. We're just adding shadows on top of shadows, so you leave some of those light darks. And we're just going to add the dark darks using this burnt umber. So here's my tympanum, my air drum. Okay, and it's got a ring shape, so I'm just going to sort of suggest that it's got some shadows in it as well, shadowed on the top especially. Okay, but the shadows in this are going to be like that. Okay, and then I'm going to vary the line on the mouth and then put a shadow under the jaw like that. Alright, now shadow underneath the shoulder here, and then the neck. Shoulder goes under the neck, and then shadow there, heavy shadow on this side of the forearm, heavy shadow on the elbow on this side, underneath here. That's pretty harsh, so I'm just going to break that up by softening the inside edge, softening it like this with dots rather than like that, which will work just as well, but then you get paint all over your hands. It's fun. Getting dirty, part of art. Okay, so shadow under the right side of the toes. So narrow at the top, thicker underneath the palm, narrower there underneath that little pad, and that looks pretty good. Okay, so moving on, back toe, thickest shadow here on the inside under the foot pad, and then under these little pads, and some little spots of dark on the toe pads. So that just gives it some variety. There you go. Shadow and light, rough skin and all that. Okay. Shadow underneath the toe. Variety, light and shadow underneath the knee. Again, using my burnt umber, which is my dark. Okay, and then break that up, give it some texture. Break that up, texture. Rump. Okay, and lots of shadow play in here where the texture is showing, and underneath the foot especially. Okay, use the paper. The paper is rough in watercolor paper, so you can use that to get some of this rough texture on the skin. And on the inside here. Okay, and where else? Eye. I'm just going to add some brown to the eye here to bring it a little darker. It's not going to be the final color. And then shadow underneath these toes. Just darkening up the shadow on these toes a little, not quite as dark. The hind leg, you want it to fall back. Leave it a little lighter. Don't make it too dark. Something like that. And now you can bring in your blues to add the really final sort of shadows to this. So I'm going to start with a sort of a purple blue, which is mixing that indigo, cerulean, cobalt. You can see how different they are. That's a pretty middle blue. That's a typical blue, the cobalt blue. And then the indigo is blue jeans colors, but it's very dark. Okay, it's the sort of thing you have a hoodie stained with. Okay, that's what I'm using as my black right now, and mix that with brown and you make black. If you mix indigo with burnt umber, you make black. That's how a lot of artists create their own blacks. Okay, I'm just going to thin that out a little bit, and I'm going to use that as my black. And it's going to be, some of these spots are going to be pretty dark, and there's going to be some shadows down in here under the rough belly. So this is my black. I went from light dark to dark dark, and now I'm in black. Okay, and that's a little harsh. I can soften that up with a brush afterwards once it's, oh, I'll do it now. It's a little bit of a waste of paint, but I'm tapping my brush on a piece of paper so that it's damp. Okay, I don't want it to be wet, I don't want it to have color in it, but I want it to be damp. That's got color, all kinds of colors in it. Where did those colors come from? Alright, so it's damp, it's not wet, and then I can sort of lift the edge a little bit. And that's going to just soften up the edge so it's not so harsh. Okay, and I can do a little bit of that in here as well. Sort of soften up the hard edges in the shadows there. I don't like those hard edges. Blend it into the body. So anything that's on the body, that's in shadow on the body, it's blended into the rest of the body, and that makes it look like it's part of the body and not something behind it. Okay, so more of that indigo. We're going to add shadows under the feet here. See how that looks like black? It's prettier than black in that it's got color to it. It's acting as that dark, intense, almost black. But black is rare. Black is quite rare, so using it would be absolutely the final thing to do, even after you've created these blue blacks by putting it with the brown. Okay, enough of that. There we go. Creating the last of my shadows here. Underneath there. Circle hump. I'm going to enhance it with a bit of that indigo. There. Okay, how are we doing for time?
5-6 minutes.
Okay, we're close.
As always, we can go a little over.
Alright, I'm just going to create that line. Again, has to be really dark. That's one of the darkest features of this frog. So I'm just going to enhance that tympanum a little bit, but I'm going to darken up that pupil as well. Darken up the shadow under the lid of the eye. Put a couple more dots of black, blue black on top there. Enhance that. Just enhancing the edge in parts, creating an effect of a line that's variable. So it's broken up completely in some places where there's no line, and then dotted in places, and then solid and changing width in others.
So Ali says, our artist from England says, isn't it true black that reflects blue in the light? True black will reflect blue in the light.
I've never heard that, but you know, there's a lot of color in black.
Yeah.
So you can have blue blacks, so you can have red blacks. Black is variable. It's got a lot of color in it, and so you can have warm blacks and you can have cool blacks. All colors, including black, can go from warm to cool. So if you have blue in it, it means it's a cool black. All right, so I'm just going to enhance the shadow underneath here, under the throat here, under the jaw, on the stripe there. That's going to pop that stripe a little bit, and then on the leg. And then I'm going to lift the resist, and that'll be it.
Beautiful. This might be my favorite one so far.
Wow.
I love frogs.
I love frogs too. There's something special about frogs. It's frogs and turtles. You know, turtles are ugly, but they're cute.
They're endearing.
They're daring. They're endearing.
The
I don't know what it is about them, but we love them.
They're smiling faces too.
Yeah, they are. So you can use other rubber cement, other. I usually have a pile of this stuff at home, so that I can just grab some, or an eraser.
Oh, Allie's following up. If someone has true black hair, it reflects blue. I have seen that.
Oh yes,
Like
that blue
raven
black
feathers
hair,
too.
that blue black.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I see what you're saying. Gotcha. But I'm now lifting the highlights by taking away the resist that I put down there in the first place before I put any paint down. And I'm using my black pearl eraser to sort of scrape it off. You could use your finger. You can use some of the resist itself to do it, or you can just use some paper, clean paper, and I'll use clean paper to finish it up just in case I smudge something. By doing this so soon after laying down black, I'm at risk of smudging things.
Oh, and Allie, Edward is doing the Sierran Treefrog, I believe.
Yes.
It's a native species in California and other parts of the western U.S.
Ta-da!
Gorgeous. Gorgeous. It's just beautiful. And then another link on the... I'll actually just do my thing at the end. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in again. I'm not sure if I'm in the shot, but now I should be. Another mention in the description. So like I said, there's the link to this photo that Edward's been drawing off of, but he also put together a really nice collage of the different colors that tree frogs can be, which is so awesome. At the beginning, if you missed it, he was talking about the tree frogs can actually change color. It's not just for chameleons. So thank you again for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. It'll be on our Facebook and our YouTube page too, the whole thing. So if you want to go back or watch it at a slower pace or anything like that, it'll be free for you to do that. We'll be doing art again, not next Tuesday, but the one after. So the 31st, we'll be wrapping up the month with some lizards that Edward will be drawing and painting. So I hope you can join us for that one too. Like I said, thanks for tuning in, and we're having more and more of these virtual events. So you can always go to our Facebook and our website, openspaceauthority.org/events. You can see all the upcoming virtual events that we're having. Besides that, hope you're staying healthy and safe and enjoying nature in whatever way that you choose. So my name's Anna Marie, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.
I added some yellow to the head.
Oh.